The 2014 NFL Draft may go down as one of the greatest wide receiver classes ever. It featured Mike Evans, Odell Beckham Jr., Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, and Kelvin Benjamin. And that's just the guys that were drafted in the first round. The rest of the 2014 draft provided us with Jarvis Landry, Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, and even role players Paul Richardson, John Brown, Martavis Bryant, Quincy Enunwa. Even Willie Snead has made an impact as an undrafted free agent from that class. But this 2020 NFL Draft class might be the first group of wide receivers in 6 years that could challenge those 2014 guys for their heavyweight title. In this video, I'm going to break down and rank the top 10 wide receivers in this 2020 draft class using 3 different tiers. I've got a safe tier. These are guys that might never be household names, but should have good NFL careers. I've got a high ceiling, low floor, which is the boomer bust guys. That doesn't mean that there's no middle ground for these players, but the things lacking from their game have a higher chance of holding them back. And then we have an elite tier, and this is the best of the best. These are the can't miss guys if there is such a thing. After all, I thought Sammy Watkins was a can't miss prospect, but injuries derailed a guy that had me as excited as any other wide receiver in the last decade. Now remember, just because 5 or more wide receivers could go in the first round this year doesn't mean that this draft class is guaranteed success. In 2015, NFL GMs tried to recreate the instant impact the 2014 draft class had as rookies, and they took 14 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds, including 6 of them in the first round alone. Amari Cooper might be the only wide receiver from that class to even come close to matching the draft selection, with Devontae Parker's grade still incomplete after finally breaking out in the Dolphins' tank season, of course. I'd argue that Tyler Lockett at pick number 69, nice, was the best overall value in the first 3 rounds, with Stephon Diggs, the 20th wide receiver taken in 2015, number 146 overall, was the steal of the class in the 5th round. And of the guys that I listed from the Living Legend 2014 class, that's only 13 notable players out of 33 wide receivers that were selected in that draft. So unless you find a Stephon Diggs, the impact guys are more than likely going to be on this list here. This 2020 wide receiver draft class is full of guys that make a majority of their plays after the catch. I think that's one of the hardest parts of projecting wide receivers to the next level, and part of the reason that I broke these guys down into tiers, because they are all so close in talent and potential that it's going to come down to what teams are looking for in their prototype and the situation providing the right opportunities and coaching to facilitate the wide receiver skills to flourish. So many times coaches expect players to adjust to their expectations when it should be the coach adjusting their expectations and opening different doors for these prospects to be successful. If this is your first time checking out one of my videos, I want to thank you for clicking on this video, and if you've made it this far in, then you're probably my kind of people and I would love for you to subscribe. The goal in this video is 1,000 likes. If we can hit 1,000 likes, I'll do another version of this video for the top 10 quarterbacks in the 2020 NFL Draft. But let's get started with the elite tier. Now remember, I'm grouping these into tiers. This is the elite tier, and I don't want us to get hung up on, oh, you think one guy is better than this guy? That's crazy. Remember, I'm grouping these guys, and I think that they're all pretty much on par with each other, because the talent is just that high in this draft class that it'd be silly to sit here and split hairs over which guy is better, CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy. I've actually been on board with saying that Jerry Jeudy is the #1 wide receiver in this draft class since the get-go. After really diving deep and looking at the potential and the ceilings and potential landing spots for these guys, I do think that I'm going to go first with CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma having the highest possible ceiling of any other wide receiver in this draft class. So let me pump the brakes and warm up to him a little bit first. Now, CeeDee Lamb is a little bit slim for a wide receiver, especially one that's 6'2", but he doesn't play slim. This is one of the more physical wide receivers I've ever seen coming out of college, and I'm looking forward to seeing him catch some veteran NFL DBs off guard and really just punking them early on in his NFL career. When it comes to attacking the ball in the air, CeeDee Lamb has some of the best ball skills in this class. I'm talking Dez Bryant toughness in the air ball skills with the aggression in which he bodies cornerbacks for the ball. He's actually got on-field angles that he needs to take after the catch, which allows him to actually get up to full speed. This prevents the defensive backs from making the tackle until he's already added 30 yards after the catch. His on-field toughness doesn't stop when the ball is no longer in the air. I guess you could say he's a willing blocker in the running game despite his stature. And I don't care if you think that hit on Mac Wilson was illegal or not, they can't flag him for it anymore, and I personally want a wide receiver one that's not afraid of contact. He's going to need to get a little more subtle with his physicality against defensive backs the next level though, because they're not going to allow this kind of push off go down even if it is in garbage time. His production may have been slightly inflated from the system he played in, with one of the great offensive minds in football calling the plays, as well as 2, not 1, but 2 #1 overall picks at quarterback in their Heisman campaign season throwing him the ball. But you can't discredit him as a prospect because of that. If anything, you have to boost him up for being the common denominator as the #1 wide receiver in offenses that were that prolific. I think he was a better downfield passer this past season. After putting on some weight and really bulking up for the position, CeeDee Lamb could have had an all-time season as a college football wide receiver, and if not for Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, he could have been the 2019 Blitnikoff Award winner. I don't think that he's as good of a route runner as Jerry Jeudy. In fact, it's probably a fact he's not as good of a route runner as Jerry Jeudy, nor does he have the long speed or quickness of Jeudy. But I do think that he's got the greater potential to be a dominant force at the next level. I'm talking all pro levels. While I don't know if Jerry Jeudy has that high of a ceiling if he's in an offense with a below average quarterback. Obviously, every wide receiver can benefit from having a good quarterback, but CeeDee Lamb will make a good or even careless quarterback look a lot better. So up next, I have Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy is a special college wide receiver with the route running ability of a seasoned NFL veteran. He's a silky smooth athlete and is an expert in getting separation. He's got this leg shake thing that frees his defensive backs and allows them to shake them off in the open field. To me, this is the future prototype for NFL wide receivers. He's got shades of Odell Beckham Jr. in his athleticism and suddenness. He's got the route running of former Bama wide receivers, Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley. He's an intelligent dude and he comes through in the clutch. There's not a safer, bust-proof wide receiver in the 2020 NFL draft. Though, like I said, I think that CeeDee Lamb has got the higher potential, but he also comes with greater risk. Jerry Jeudy is the safer of the two because his skill set translates so well. However, Jerry Jeudy did play with the most stacked offensive unit in college football with a really good quarterback prospect himself, so he couldn't be keyed on by the defense or else Henry Ruggs would be flying past you or Devontae Smith is catching 1 or 2 touchdowns on you. Unfortunately, another trait that he shares with his Bama predecessor, Amari Cooper, is that he's shown lapses in concentration, which leads to some drops. And I always think that this is because when you're this dangerous after the catch, you're likely already sizing defenders up and not looking the ball in every time. But this is something that you can eliminate with just a little bit of extra coaching and practice. But Jeudy's also really lean and narrow, so standing up to the rigors of a 16 or 17 game season is a legit concern, especially when he's the go-to option on an offense. And where he ends up getting selected, he's more than likely going to be the #1 wide receiver from day one. Jeudy was mostly used in the slot at Alabama also, even though his traits would seem to translate well to being an X receiver in the NFL, and being forced to the slot mostly is a credit to the weapons that were around him at Alabama, so he might not have the contested catch resume that CeeDee Lamb has. But to get the most out of Jeudy at the next level, I think you've got to pair him with a quarterback that is a good anticipatory thrower downfield, because that's where the big plays are going to come with Jeudy after shaking defensive backs in coverage with his speed and that leg shimmy thing I was talking about. Honestly, for those that wanted to see Lamar Jackson play wide receiver, his childhood friend Jerry Jeudy is probably the closest that we'll ever get to that scenario. And that's it for the elite tier of wide receivers in this draft. And we don't have to go far for the first guy that I have in the high ceiling, low floor tier, because it's none other than Jerry Jeudy's teammate, Henry Ruggs III. The NFL is a copycat league, and after using Tyreek Hill as the deep threat of a Super Bowl winning offense, Chiefs should probably get some credit for moving Henry Ruggs into probably the top 15 of the NFL draft this year. Ruggs is a more polished route runner than Tyreek Hill was as a rookie, and he has that comparable speed and a clean character background too, so the sky is really the limit for this guy. Now, we are talking about the world-class speed that you can't usually find in a polished receiving prospect like this. While guys like CeeDee Lamb are able to kick it into second gear quickly after the catch, Ruggs III has in fact a third, maybe even a fourth gear that he jets into after getting the ball in his hands, and it looks like your little brother playing on the rookie difficulty level while you keep it on all Madden as he just runs past everybody on defense. Ruggs also has much more natural catching hands than a man of his stature, so he's got some contested catchability too. Even though he compares well to Tyreek Hill, I don't really consider either of them to be wide receiver one kind of guys. Tyreek Hill might be the top option listed at wide receiver for the Chiefs, but let's be honest, Travis Kelce is the #1 receiver in that offense. And Henry Ruggs didn't shoulder the load as the Crimson Tide's #1 wide receiver either. That guy arguably isn't even in this draft class. It's not that he's a one-trick pony kind of deep threat, it's that this type of gadget player requires a top offensive mind calling the plays to scheme them into the game plan. They have to be constantly on the move to keep the defense on their heels. Having a guy like Andy Reid, though, can be the difference between careers of a Tyreek Hill or a Ted Ginn. One of them has instant success, and one of them has to climb uphill to finally find themselves in a place that works for them, with a guy that will take advantage of their skill set. After a really hot start to the 2019 season, Ruggs finished his junior year with an almost identical stat line to his sophomore year, and it's a shame he wasn't able to play with Tua for the entirety of the season because his production really took a hit with the QB change. And then size becomes somewhat of a concern with a guy like this because you don't want another John Ross situation with the injuries preventing them from reaching their full potential. His 40-yard dash time at the NFL Combine could vault him even higher into the draft, but with Jerry Jeudy having more than enough deep speed of his own and CeeDee Lamb being the ultimate X factor in this class, it's hard to see Henry Ruggs rising in the top 2 wide receivers of this draft class. The Broncos at 15 do feel like the earliest that Ruggs can expect to go, but if a team like the Giants surprises us and takes a wide receiver in the top 5, then all bets are off, and Ruggs could likely go as high as 11 to the Jets, maybe even 9 to the Jaguars. Up next, I've got Colorado wide receiver Laviska Shenault. This is a plug-and-play kind of guy. He can be moved all over the place to find mismatches in the defense. He's the kind of guy that got picked first during recess no matter what the sport was, because he just looks like he was made in some creative player mode where you move the muscle definition all the way up. His style of play with the ball in his hands reflects this physical stature also. This dude is a bully and will lower his shoulder to seek contact on defensive backs. Laviska Shenault also attacks the ball across the middle with the same energy. He's got strong hands and can adjust well to poorly thrown balls. The quarterback play at Colorado was nothing to write home about, and he might get paired up with a really good quarterback that can fully take advantage of his skills and become the next big thing. Going back to that recess analogy, if you were picking Shenault first in a game of pickup basketball, for example, he's the type of guy that would have you feeling like you got an all-around beast, but not all of the physical traits would translate to rebounding, navigating passing lanes in a fast break, setting picks, stuff like that. The rebounding would be, his ability to win contested jump balls. There's no reason that he should lose to guys smaller than he is. His poor route running would be his inability to navigate passing lanes in a fast break, right? And the setting the picks, that's referring to his ability as a run blocker. The fact that a physical specimen like Laviska Shenault struggles in these areas is kind of a random phenomenon that you just can't really explain other than he needs to be coached up in these areas. But I hate it when I hear other people say things like that, because it's like, what have his coaches been doing with him up until this point? I think that he's just a naturally gifted athlete, and sadly as fans, these are questions that we are unlikely to get answers to, because you need to personally ask him why he hasn't grown in these areas and how he intends to get better at them. This is what the NFL Combine is mostly for these days, so that coaches and GMs can actually sit down with a guy and see what he's all about. Overall, Laviska Shenault reminds me a lot of Sammy Watkins coming out of Clemson. So if I felt like I was knocking him a lot, and maybe I'm a little bit jaded by the yearly letdown from Sammy Watkins to start his career, which leads me to have a little bit of hesitation with Laviska Shenault and the warts in his game that I just can't explain. Up next, we have TCU wide receiver Jalen Reagor. If Henry Ruggs was a box of cereal, this kid out of TCU is like an off-brand version. It comes in a bag. You're getting similar potential as a deep threat and gadget player to create mismatches all over the field with world-class speed, but you can get him in the back half of the first round, possibly even the second round, therefore coming at a discounted price. But Jalen Reagor is one of my favorite wide receiver prospects in this draft class, and if I wasn't a coward, I would have put him above Henry Ruggs at number 3 behind the big 2 in this draft class. If you want to look at what Henry Ruggs' production would have looked like had he not been in one of the most stacked rosters in college football, look at how the transition to a new quarterback paired with an overall down season for TCU affected Jalen Reagor's production in 2019. Although his junior season did provide him with more opportunity to get the contested ball in the end zone, this dude knows what is on the line when the ball is in the air and doesn't let the fact that he's not even 5'11" get in his way of securing 6 points. Reagor has an NFL pedigree, and his father, Monte Reagor, was drafted by the Broncos in the second round of the 1999 NFL draft. I didn't even realize that this was his dad until I started researching these guys for this video, and it made me feel kind of old that I recognized the name. Reagor does have an occasional issue with drops, but like I said, when you're prepping to turn on the Jets and take it to the house once it hits your hands, it's just a necessary evil to protect from wide receivers, and Ruggs is the name brand, Reagor is the off-brand stuff in the bag, then Penn State wide receiver KJ Hamler is instant oatmeal. He's got similar upside to the other guys, but if you took the warts from both of them and added them all into one guy, you got KJ Hamler. Instant oatmeal, it comes in these tiny little packets. It's never enough, and it's never as good as you think it's going to be. But I don't want to start off negatively with Hamler, because really he could end up being the best value pick of all 3 speed demons. But he's got the slim frame of Ruggs, except he's even slimmer, and he lacks the physicality that Reagor seems to lack at times, except KJ Hamler might be physically incapable of improving his physicality against defensive backs as he enters the big leagues, because he's just too damn small. I'm not sure if short people are offended by this term in this day and age, but I find it kind of endearing, and the word scrappy is the best description of his effort to overcome his size on the field. The hands on Hamler are also not quite as natural of catcher's mitts as Ruggs or Reagor seem to possess, but man, this dude is fast and he is a fluid athlete. If not for such a deep wide receiver class, we're talking about him as a fringe first rounder, but his 5'9" frame really does lock him in as a J2 guy at best. He didn't have the best quarterback play at Penn State either, but seemed to come through in the clutch for them when they needed him the most, and that's saying something when a 5'9" wide receiver is your go-to guy on so many third downs. And he's a guy that just shows up every week for you on the stat sheet in some degree. Brandon Cooks is my pro comp for Hamler, and Cooks has a slightly thicker frame than Hamler, but you see the durability issues that he's been dealing with. I mean, you can't thicken your skull no matter how much you bench or squat. So that's it for my high ceiling, low floor guys. Those are the guys that you're going to take if you want to gamble a little bit and your offense lacks a little bit of a home run hitter type. But this next tier is the safe tier. These guys are going to be reliable number 2 or number 3 wide receivers for you, yard guys, unless they're in the Chiefs offense or something really pass heavy like that. And I'm going to lead this tier off with LSU's wide receiver Justin Jefferson. Now, he gets to lead off this tier of safe wide receivers because his size and route running should help him carve out a niche in the NFL if paired with a consistent quarterback. At LSU, he was basically playing in a version of the Saints offense, which could speed up his transition into the NFL. Jefferson is also a safe day 2 option because he's got reliable hands to go with that route running, so he's going to wind up being a safety blanket for a quarterback going through their progressions because they can rely on him being where he's supposed to be and he will come down with the ball and test the catch. It does help that he got to play with a guy that has one of the most prolific quarterback seasons we've ever seen by a college quarterback, not to mention the 2019 group of wide receivers at LSU is almost as deep as this draft class, that trend that we've been seeing more and more frequently in the NFL. He may never become a number 1 wide receiver, so hopefully he lands it. Up next, I've got Clemson wide receiver T. Higgins. T. Higgins is coming from another NFL factory where he also had an elite marriage with a quarterback that is likely to go number 1 in the next NFL draft. If you'd asked me at the beginning of the 2019 season, I would have said that T. Higgins is easily a superior NFL prospect to Justin Jefferson, but he showed some inconsistencies and I don't want to sound harsh, but it seemed like there was some flakiness against stiffer competition from him. He absolutely dominated lesser opponents on the reg. It seemed like he was Mr. Hat-Trick against unranked teams and maybe questionable to return against the ranked squads. I'm actually a big fan of T. Higgins. I think the upside is there with anybody in this class. He's got AJ Green potential from the size, the smooth gazelle-like route running, the ability to high point the ball and just moss DBs, and nobody in this class rips the ball from the air quite like T. Higgins. He might be a hair behind Jefferson as far as being a safe prospect, but Higgins has a much higher ceiling and has the chance to be a Michael Thomas for some team in the second round and quickly ascend to wide receiver 1 status. For him, I think it all falls on what's between the ears. Moving on to Arizona State wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk is in the safe tier because of his ability after the catch. It can be easy to quickly scheme the ball into the hands of a wide receiver, but not all of them can make something happen afterwards like he can. He also shows some playmaking abilities on special teams, so you know you're going to get something out of him right out of the box. At times, I felt like I was watching a leaner N'Keal Harry, but Ayuk is able to get more consistent downfield targets than his former teammate. He had a lot of pressure on him to shoulder the load at Arizona State as the go-to guy, and man, he delivered. However, he's not quite ready for NFL cornerbacks just yet and may disappoint as a rookie if his future coaching staff asks this round peg to fit in a square role in the offense. This is a nice complementary piece to the puzzle until he can refine his route running. Otherwise, I think that he's an easy defend for NFL cornerbacks. And you know what? Before we move on to number 10, I want to give out some honorable mentions because for the 10th spot, I probably put more thought into the player than any other slot because I'm leaving out so many more people than I am just shifting 1 through 9 around. And first up are 2 guys that I have actually witnessed playing live. They might not actually be the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th guy on a lot of draft boards, but to me, there's nothing like scouting a player when you've actually been able to see them live with your own eyes and be able to see the entire field and that live speed. You guys know I'm a Charlottesville guy, and Liberty comes up here every single year. So Antonio Gandy Golden is one of my pet cats this year. I like to call him Baby Julio, and I think that he's got a really high ceiling, and I have no idea how he ended up on Liberty. But the other guy that I've got to give a shout out to is UVA's wide receiver Joe Reed. And I wasn't even going to include this, but when I saw him show up to the combine at over 220 pounds, I felt like he needed to be included because this guy's going to find a way onto an NFL roster. He's an epic return guy. He's got lightning speed. I might even consider moving him to running back if he's going to be running around at 220. But keep an eye out for him because he's a pretty special player too. And then these other 3 guys that I have with honorable mentions are probably more appropriately placed in the 10 to 15 range on draft boards here. And that's Baylor wide receiver Denzel Mims. My only hesitation with him is that Baylor wide receivers have had hit or miss production in the NFL lately. Then I've got USC wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr., another college with hit or miss wide receivers translating to the NFL, but Pittman's got a huge frame and a solid base of skills. I don't expect an instant impact from him, but he's a guy that I would definitely take a waiver on to see if I could develop. And lastly, Minnesota wide receiver Tyler Johnson. It's easy to nitpick on this guy's game because he doesn't have any flashy features to it, but the production is there and he just seems to be the type of guy that I would want on my team rather than someone else's. All right, and in the 10th and final slot, I've got a bonus tier for you guys for a guy that I consider to be the day 2 wild card. He was highly regarded coming out of high school, but inconsistent quarterback play, as well as a really deep wide receiver and tight end depth chart, really limited his on-field production. I think his college experience will serve as a buffer for his transition into the NFL, and he's gonna end up having an Anquan Bolden kind of instant impact as a rookie, and that is Donovan Peoples-Jones out of Michigan. Under Jim Harbaugh, DPJ has experienced NFL's style of coaching while playing in one of the least prolific offenses in a power conference. While the offense may have been boring, DPJ brings an old school #1 wide receiver skill set that was perfect for his role at Michigan. He's probably going to get drafted by a team that still values those old school offensive principles, meaning they want gritty wide receivers that can hold their own in the running game while using hand fighting to beat press coverage, to go over the middle and make a possession catch on 3rd and long. Donovan Peoples-Jones is not the biggest, the fastest, or the strongest, but is in the top tier for overall athleticism in all of the categories that you can think of. I'm all for the progression of NFL offenses adapting to the future of football being based more around spread concepts, but I can't wait to see DPJ used with a little offensive ingenuity at the next level to see what he's actually capable of. That's going to do it for me. Those are my top 10 wide receivers in the 2020 NFL Draft. Please let me know in the comments below what you thought of this list, who you would change, what order you would put them in. Remember, my order is loosely based on the order in which I delivered them to you, but more so focused around the tiers and the groupings. I'd love to hear what you guys think of the 3 speed demons. Which one would you prefer to take based on where you would be able to get them in the draft, and if you'd rather trade back for a Rager or a Hamler than spend a top 15 pick on a Henry Ruggs. Remember, the goal for this video is 1,000 likes. If we hit 1,000, I will do a version of this for the quarterbacks, and so on and so forth. Be sure to subscribe because I only upload probably once or twice a week, if that. I'm looking forward to doing a post scouting combine NFL mock draft number 3 for me this year at some point next week. So stay tuned, and I will see you all in the next video.